Okay, I hope you can all see the screen. So we are looking at ethical theories. And last week, after at the end of the lecture, most at the end there, we looked at briefly at ethical theories, which guide us on how to make those to maneuver through ethical dilemmas or create an environment that will allow ICT users to make ethically appropriate decisions as they use ICT. So we're going to look at the theories themselves today. There are three of them, and we shall discuss them in detail. So let me just pick out a marker here. So we want to look at the role of theory in the world. Yeah, we have the world as we know it, and in the world we have different things. First and foremost, we try to understand this world. We try to understand this world. We try to understand each other. We try to understand ourselves. We try to understand everything that is around us. And then, too, once we understand, we want to see how we can change it. Yeah? How we can change it. So, theory helps us to we have two types of theory. We have the descriptive theory, and then we have the ethical theory. So descriptive theory is that which explains to us why something is the way it is. So I'll give you an example. Have you heard about Darwin's theory of evolution? Have you heard about Darwin's theory of evolution?
No, I've never.
No.
Nobody has never heard. Okay. Have you heard this theory when people say that we came from apes?
Madam, we've heard about such theories.
Yeah. So it basically, that belief basically comes from Darwin's theory of evolution. So Darwin observed the world, and from his observation, he came to the conclusion on the subject of evolution that let me give an example. If you look at the people that were in Uganda, let's say 100 years ago, we're not the same as people who were here. The genetic, some of the genetic traits that we had 100 years ago are not the same as what we have today. In meaning that as a people, as a race, as a tribe, as whatever it is, as a society, we have changed over the course of 100 years. Yeah. So in that sense, his theory explains that over time, species will automatically adapt to their environment. And because of that adoption, they begin to change. Take an example now, you may find, for example, that we are maybe taller, we may be bigger. Maybe before 100 years, you would find more people were a little bit more stunted than right now. So things that is what we refer to as evolution. So from there, other theories came, like other understandings, like we came from apes. Though I don't know if that is entirely true, because there's never been anything to prove otherwise. So now we have the ethical theory. So ethical theory is the ought to. Yeah? This is where this part comes in. Sorry, my mouse is acting up. This is where this part comes in. the ethical theory. So we have descriptive theory like evolution theory, then we have ethical theory. So ethical theory, it tells us that this is how something ought to be. This is how something should be. So so ethical theory in other words is the one which guides the action of somebody, an individual's action. Yeah. It guides the individual's action to do something, how to change something. This is something ought to be like this way. Because it ought to be like this, let me act this way so that it is the way it should be. Yeah. So we have three core ethical theories. The first is what is referred to as utilitarianism or consequence-based theory. Sorry, my mouse is a little bit erratic. So we have the ethical theory, the consequence-based theory, utilitarianism. In a nutshell, we're going to go into detail. Utilitarianism looks at the cost benefit. The thing that gives the highest amount of pleasure, that's the one we should follow. That's why it's consequence based. If this thing brings about pleasure, then we should do it. If it brings about happiness, then this is what should do it. If it gives the least amount of pain, this is the course of action we should take. So utilitarianism was developed by these two individuals, these philosophers, Mill and Bentham. And as we said, the consequences, we look for the greatest happiness principle. Yeah. So we make our decision based on what will bring about the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. Now, for ICT, especially of ICT, when we are trying to measure if a particular application or ICT tool is going to be adopted or the market will like it, we normally use utilitarianism. So, take an example. If, let's say, a new application has been developed, and we want to know if this application if this application will be adopted, will be user friendly, or will be liked by users. The test to the market is always to find out if the greatest, whether it brings about the highest amount of pleasure. If using this application means I'm going to increase my pleasure, or if then I'll take it. So ICT, this is where ICT uses this theory a great deal. So that's the first one. The second one is deontology. So here, deontology, unlike utilitarian, which says that if this thing brings about happiness, then let us allow it to be used. Deontology says no, we have a moral code and everyone must conform to it, whether you like it or you don't. Yeah, whether you like this thing or you don't, everyone must conform to this principle. So it is a very it's a very law-like kind of theory. Then you have the virtue theory, perfecting one's character. So the virtue theory is where somebody says where somebody develops a certain virtue, for example, punctuality, honesty. Let me choose to be honest. Let me choose to be on time every time I come to work. Let me choose to carry out my tasks and complete them. Let me be reliable. That is the virtue theory. So deontology was developed by Kant and virtue was by Aristotle. So we're going to go through each of these theories in detail. So here, what do we mean by dilemmas? Ethical dilemmas. Here are just a few examples. You have an example here of a trolley, which has two courses to take. On each course, whatever course it takes, there are going to be some casualties. You have one course where if it takes it, then the trolley may run over 5 people, and then the other course where the trolley may run over 1 person. And somebody has to make a decision which would be the most ethical side to take, where I kill 5 people or I kill 1 person. And another person may argue, why am I killing anyone? Or another person may argue that the person controlling the trolley may have the option of switching or may have the option of stopping it. Who is it that is taking the decision? Is it the person controlling, and how does this individual then make a decision on which route to take? Of course, this is a very, very, very hypothetical question, or rather very unrealistic question. We don't normally have to see something like this, but essentially that's what ethics means. How do we make those ethical decisions? Am I deciding based on the least amount of damage, or simply saying I'm not ready to kill anyone, let me maybe derail this trolley completely? So as this person who is controlling, this individual who is controlling, has an ethical decision to make. And we all have those ethical decisions, maybe not as far-fetched as what we see here, but we all have those ethical decisions to take. You have another one here where you see another trolley problem, where the trolley is coming, no one is controlling, but you see there are 2 people who are observing, and they have the option of walking down and actually helping and saying, maybe we can go down and untie these people in time, so at least maybe 1, 2, or 3, or all of them are safe, but they are simply standing and watching by. They are watching as this thing happens. Unlike the first, where somebody is actually has some level of control, these ones are watching. Actually, I remember a story which broke out. Nano, I don't think most of you were, some of you may not have been born at that time. It happened so many years ago, I can't remember even the time. I think I was still young. There was a famine in, I think, Somalia. It wasn't war, it was famine. And people were actually starving to death, literally starving to death. There were images on news, they'll take pictures of these, maybe children, especially children who were severely malnourished. It wasn't a disease, it was just that somebody was dying from hunger. And then there was a picture taken. There was I think one of these international reporters took a picture. There was a child who was trying to walk to one of these centers where they could find food, and the child collapsed. And at a distance, at short distance away, these birds, these vultures, the kind that wait for someone to die, then they come eating at the carcass of the dead person. Do you know that those birds?
Scavenger birds in Sege.
Yes, those birds. Now, that bird, this person took a picture of that child, the child who had collapsed, not yet dead, and there was this bird waiting. And when that picture came out, there was really an outcry saying, sincerely speaking, this person stood by and took a picture. Was that the most important thing he or she could do? Didn't this person have a moral obligation to at least lift this child and take the child where there was food, rather than take advantage and take a picture? So that is also another question of an ethical dilemma. For us, now this may seem nothing related to ICT, but I gave you the example of whistleblowing. There was that gentleman, again I forget his name, in the US, who, because he worked for NASA, knew that the US government was spying on US citizens by collecting data from them unknowingly for purposes of their intelligence. But this gentleman said, no, this is not ethically right. And he did what we call whistleblowing, where he informed people. He came out and told people what was happening. But of course, the result of that was that he was declared his act was declared treasonous, and right now I think he lives in Russia. he had to run away from the US because of that act. But it's a typical example of saying, I'm seeing this thing happen and I'm not saying anything about it. And ethically, it's not right. I must say something about it. And ICT people, they are found, they are people who can actually see some things that may be going on, and they may have an ethical dilemma of, should I talk about this? Should I keep quiet? And so on and so forth. You have another case of an organ transplant surgeon. Now, this is also another very hot area where an organ transplant surgeon, somebody who knows that you have these patients who need a liver and so on and so forth, and then you have patients you're taking care of, and you wonder what kind of ethical dilemmas they may go through. They may look at somebody who maybe is dying and may will that this person dies, or may wish this person dies, so that they can give the organ to somebody else. So that's also another area where you find hot button areas for ethical dilemmas. So let us look at the first two theories, consequentialism and deontology. So consequentialism is rightness depends on the consequences. What is the greatest happiness I can get? Deontology looks at rightness depends at least on part on or a form of moral rule, where you have a moral rule that if I follow this code of conduct, I should be okay. Yeah. So these two, let me first check if there's some further. No, so let me first go back. These two, we shall go back to consequentialism a little bit later. These two theories. Now, when we look at consequentialism, you can't have a situation where, let me give an example. If we're looking at an application and we're saying how much pleasure, for example, if one was to measure how much pleasure we all get from using WhatsApp or from using TikTok, yeah, how much pleasure? It's, of course, most of us, we have a thumbs up, we enjoy using it. Now, let's move to other things. Let's say like drug use, yeah, or using these opioids like heroin. Then you have other things which may not necessarily be like opioids, like weed. People have a lot of pleasure using them, but is it ethically right to use them? Hello?
No, it's not.
Yeah, of course it's not. So that is, so you find that in that situation, consequentialism may be okay in some situations, but not okay in others. So you can use consequentialism in some situations to make an ethical decision, then in other cases, no. Then deontology, which depends on a formal rule, moral rule. And especially, we always say there's the golden rule, do unto others what you have them do unto you. So normally there's a rule which we apply across the board, and this rule must stand. So take an example. If I say my anything sent to me on my personal email on my phone is my private information, and I can only give you access if you can only access it when I've given you access to it. Yeah, that's a golden rule. Everyone wants their privacy. It's a golden rule. Everyone with their personal information, whatever they're doing, there are things which are personal to us, and we want to keep that personal space. Just as somebody says, my bedroom is my personal space, I don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to enter, just come into my room and just sit there, or sit on my bed or things like that, or find me in my room. That's a golden rule. If I came to your house, I will not enter your bedroom. Maybe I'll go to the sitting room, but I will not come to your bedroom. That's a golden rule. So likewise, even my phone, my laptop, that's personal to me. My emails, my personal email, that's personal to me. My WhatsApp account, that's personal to me. My whatever account, all these things that we do online, they are personal to each one of us. Therefore, if there's a golden rule to ensure data privacy and security, there's a golden rule that to ensure data privacy and security. And we say all our platforms must be password protected. Our network should be password protected. We should have firewalls and all of that and so on, things like that. That's a golden rule for everyone, and we must adhere to it. Therefore, if somebody comes and says, let's say, I gave you the example, if one of you, let's say, was the systems administrator in a certain company, and the boss comes and asks you because he or she knows you have rights, you have the capacity to get into somebody's email box, asks you to do so, knowing that you have you have the skills to do it, then the deontology rule comes in to stop even the boss requesting for that kind of information, because there's that golden rule that cuts across the board. Now, is this golden rule applicable in all areas? No. There are situations where the golden rule may not be applicable. It's too rigid. But we shall discuss that even a little bit later. Here are some challenges to ethical decision making. One of them is relativism, that specifically affects those two theories. Relativism. What I feel, look at this, what I feel is right is right. What I feel is wrong is wrong. That is a typical example of relativism. If I get up and tell all of you, for me, I feel it is right to use profane language. Just an example. I feel it is right for me to use profane language. Okay? Or somebody says, I feel, the minute you start by saying, for me, this is what I feel is right, and whether for you feel it's wrong, it's wrong. That's a typical example of relativism. If people decide to choose what to do depending on what you feel, then if at a certain moment I feel I should kill someone, I do it. If I feel I can insult anyone in any setting, I simply do it. Yeah? So that in itself, it affects these two, both consequentialism and deontology. Just to tell you about let's come to consequentialism, which talks about pleasure. If we were to make a decision to do something based on pleasure, someone can get up and say, for me, I find it pleasurable to eat stones. Now, as much as that is pleasurable, it's not right. It's harmful. Our mouth was not meant to eat stones. Our digestive system is not designed to eat stones. Even if you feel like doing it, even if it gives you pleasure, it's not ethically right because the body is not meant for that. Yeah? Deontology there comes in saying a human being is created to eat food. Okay? So it is unethical to allow somebody to eat stones in that sense. Let's go further on consequentialism. Let us say a group of students find it pleasurable to bully others while they are online. Imagine a group of students say it is pleasurable for them to bully others while they are online. As much as it's pleasurable for them, it's not right. As much as it is pleasurable for them, it's not right. So their deontology comes in to support. Okay? So these are some of the things, the relativism that that may affect these two, where he said there's no objective truth, only individuals' feelings or preferences. Okay? That is typically relativism. And all of these that I've been talking about, these are some of the criticisms, why relativism is a danger. We also have cultural relativism based on people's cultures and customs. So take an example. In some countries, it is still okay to stone women. Look at this picture. In some countries, in some customs, it's okay to stone women. Typically, those are that is cultural relativism. So in that sense, these affect ethical theories or they create ethical dilemmas. Now, a few things that we must take note of. Following the law is not the same as being morally upright. Yeah? Following the law is not the same as doing something that's morally upright. As much as deontology is something we would like, but having almost a law-like code does not make something morally right. And I think here, the legal system is one of the examples, for me personally, I've seen that really abuses ethics. I remember one time I was talking to a lawyer who said, you see, there is the truth and then there is the law. They are not the same thing. The law can make something right when it is actually wrong. The law can set someone who is guilty free. Simply, the law can do that. So what is morally right is not necessarily, what is a law doesn't necessarily mean that something is moral. It's a moral obligation. That's one of the criticisms towards deontology. Then we have ethical egoism. Everyone ought to do what his or her own rational interest is. More close to relativism. It's quite close to relativism. So now here we got into consequentialism in detail, which is utilitarianism. They are the same. Yeah, it was started by this man Jeremy Bentham, where they said here we're going into it in detail. The morally right act for an agent A at a time T. So you have an agent A, an individual, at a particular time. That act is available to them to A, and at time T, they will maximize the total amount of good in the world. At a certain time, now this one says at a particular time, if this thing gives me the greatest amount of good, then this is the morally right thing to do. The greatest good for the greatest number of people. This is typically utilitarianism. Sometimes it is referred to as hedonistic. Hedonistic looks at pleasure. It's referring to pleasure. The term hedonistic. What is good? Pleasure and the absence of pain are good. Okay? That is utilitarianism. So pleasure is any sensation you'd rather have rather than no sensation at all, or any pain. Any pain you'd rather not have. So that's what pleasure is. We want to maximize my feeling good and reduce any amount of pain that I might have. Yeah? And you can't have even a measuring scale where to say which pain am I willing to have or not have. The worst pain, moderate or no pain at all. This is what Bentham thinks are some of the advantages of utilitarianism. They say neutralistic because it treats everyone the same. It treats everyone the same. However, there are some criticisms as well because what somebody's pain, pleasure may be, it could be somebody else's pain. I may, again, like the example of online bullying, I may have pleasure in bullying you, but that doesn't give you pleasure as an individual. It should be, they say, Bentham says it is realistic. It is based on real psychology. It works with people as it finds them and organizes society in that way. Non-metaphysical. It doesn't make goodness slash badness or rightness, wrongness, some sort of weird quality. What is in the natural world? They're looking at what is in the natural world. What is good, what is bad. Non-elitist, what is pleasurable for a wealthy person is pleasurable for a poor person. What is pleasurable for upper class is pleasurable for lower class. It's determinate in principle. That means we can always determine, we can always calculate pleasure. Yeah. So in the hedonic calculus, we are looking at determining intensity times duration, the intensity of the pleasure it gives and for how long it can give it. Then determine probability, how many times. So we are how it can be measured. We are looking at how much pleasure. Remember the scale we gave you? Let me give an example of that scale. Have you ever seen these scales which ask maybe, for example, on how you feel about a certain application, where they say on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the pleasure you get from using this application or this device? And they say 1 being the least, 5 being the highest, and maybe 3 is the in between, to say it's moderate. So someone measures the intensity. Then duration. Duration is for how long do you experience this? And every time I use this application, maybe for the past 1 year, it has always given me this kind of pleasure. That's duration. Probability is how many people feel the same about this thing. The higher the number of the people, the higher that is, then the higher the probability of using this thing. It is determined to be ethically right to use this thing. How do we regard the different types of pleasure? Number one, what counts as pleasure? Now that's a very good question. What may be counted as pleasure for you may not be pleasure for me. So you find what the sadistic or misogynistic pleasures. So sadistic and misogynist is where somebody, for example, I feel good if you are in pain, or I feel good if I cause you pain. There are such individuals who are there. So this is where one of the dilemmas of utilitarianism, what happens for such characters in society? So like I gave the example, there are some people who may say, I find pleasure from bullying someone else. Betham says the source of pleasure doesn't matter. You hear people say things like the end justifies the means. Is that really true? If my source of pleasure is your suffering, should my pleasure be acceptable to society? Are there higher or lower pleasures? So for Betham, it says it's a subjective criterion, push pin. So there are for some people, this pleasure may be higher, for others, it's lower. So again, we already see, by just that statement, it means that utilitarianism is not necessarily the best option to pick what is pleasurable. So here it comes to the question I was giving you earlier on the terms of pleasure. If somebody says, for me, I like eating stones, is that something that should be allowed? No. So I'd given this explanation earlier. We use utilitarianism very much when we're trying to gauge a market. So I already gave you the example of, let us say, an IT person develops an application, develops a system. You want to know what the market, the users, those who are going to use the system, what they feel about it. If the highest pleasure and the greatest number of people, then you'll say, this is the right application to use. So utilitarianism has that great advantage when it comes to getting the market view. Yeah. But when it comes to the administrative view, so at administrative view, or looking at the policy experts, those who may try to manipulate an economy in order to improve the outcome of something. So in administrative wise, I gave you the example of a gentleman who I taught at master's level, who told me how he works for this person who was dealing with cryptocurrency. And this man would tell him to manipulate the figures, so that it would entice more and more people to come in and buy cryptocurrency. The unfortunate thing about that is that you end up defrauding the market. You end up defrauding the market. So in the administrative side of things, utilitarianism is not good. So some criticisms, one, it's difficult to apply because people's pleasures change over time. People care more than just pleasure. There are many things we do that are not out of pleasure. Take an example, an athlete who wakes up at 5 a.m. to practice, 4 a.m. I was listening to some high-profile people. One lady was talking about how sports really shaped her. She said, I would get up even in the rain to go do practice. And I would be telling myself, am I really serious? I got out of my bed to practice. But she said, I continued to do it because I knew the value of it at the end of the day. So human beings, we value much more than pleasure. So it's not a theory that you can apply constantly. We cannot reduce all human goods into quantifiable units. Not all goods can be quantified. There is no limit how far into the future we can consider consequences. If we are to say we're only considering, there are some things we use now that feel good now, but later on become a burden. So take an example, alcoholism, drug abuse, things like that. And so on and so forth. So let's first look at other forms of utilitarianism. We have rule utilitarianism. Here we always act according to the rule that could produce the most utility in the world. We have preference, where we look at the number of people who gain satisfaction from doing this thing or from taking this course of action. Now, when we talk about utilitarianism, we have to talk about rights and duties. Let me give you an example. I have a right to vote. Now, because I have a right to vote, I have the duty to vote. Okay? Now, for some people may not find voting pleasurable, but in reality, it's a duty. I have a right to public services, but then I have a duty to pay tax. I have a right to public services, but then I have the duty to pay tax. Do I find it pleasurable to pay tax? No. But if I have a right to access to public services like public hospitals and public schools and so on and so forth, then I should have the responsibility, the duty of paying tax. I must fulfill that. One might say, if I have the right not to be killed, then I have a duty not to kill. So these are automatically things that are going against utilitarianism and leaning towards deontology. We have negative rights. If I have the right not to kill, if I have a right not to be killed, have your property. I have the right not to be killed. I have the right to property. I have the right not to be stolen, to be raped, and so on and so forth. So on and so forth. So then you have the negative rights and the positive rights. You have the right to entitlements. Sorry. You have the right to due process and so on and so forth. So these ones are already pointing to deontology, which is law-like. So here we come to deontology itself. So that the origin of this theory is Immanuel Kant. Here you have the moral superiority of the motive rather than giving into credit to inclination. Take an example. I have the right to life. Even if somebody feels that I should be dead, I have the right to life. That is a moral superiority. Here, unlike utilitarianism, sorry, my mouse is very, very erratic. The pursuit of ethical purity is linked to the pursuit of a certain goal. It's not linked to a certain goal. You are seeking to attain this moral superiority, whether it brings you pleasure or it doesn't bring you pleasure. But because it is the right thing to do, it is the duty to do it, we do it. So take an example. You have a right to education. I therefore have, or you have the right to have a class today in ethics. Whether I feel like it or not, I must come and teach you. Yeah? So whether it gives me pleasure or not, I must come and teach you. You have the right to come to class, but you also have the moral obligation. You have the right to an education because you have paid school fees, but you have the moral obligation to attend class, whether you feel like it or you don't. Yeah. So this is where deontology differs from utilitarianism. So the golden rule is what governs deontology. What is right, if it's right for me, it's right for you. What is right for you is right for me. So it helps us to execute one or an umbrella moral code for everyone. So here are just some imperatives that rule deontology. Never treat a person merely as a means to an end, but always treat them as an end in themselves. So let us say you have a mass killer. If you say the rule is you shall not take a life, so you therefore have that rule that even if you have this mass murderer, if he's caught, you cannot end his life. Even if he has killed the most children only, and as much as you want to kill him, you treat him as the human being that he is. If your rule is that we are all human, and as human beings, we don't have the right to take another person's life. So that is rules, the second formulation of some of the rules that help us form deontology. That is the second one. Now there's the first one. Act only according to the maxim that you can at the same time will that it should become a universal rule, a rule that applies to everyone. So again, we give the example of the right to life, whether the person is a mass murderer or not, whether this person has killed children or not, that rule stands for everyone. Whether you're saying a mass murderer shouldn't be murdered, just like we should not murder a thief, we take it all the same. So we create a sincere and rational maxim, the law. And this law states what you propose to do and why. You universalize that maxim to everyone. Everyone must be aware of what this law is, and this law stands for every single person. So let us say, when we say universalize, when we formulate and universalize. So let us say we formulate a rule in UMU that private data must be protected and must only be accessed by those who have rights to it. So we can say, therefore we can say, if my email address is my private data, no one should touch it. At the same time, if we say results are protected data only to be accessed by the result owner and the one who creates the result, that means the faculty or the lecturer and the student. That is a formula, we're formulating it, then we universalize it for all students. Students at Masaka campus, Fort Poto campus, Nkozi campus, Rubaga, Ngeta, Mbale, all of them, all campuses are covered by that rule. It's universalized for everyone. Then you have step 3. Imagine the world that would result from conjoining all laws of physics with the law you made in step 2. Yeah? Step 2, what was step 2? Never treat a person merely as a means to an end, but always treat them as an end in themselves. Step 4, test the maxim. Test if this law is actually universal. So how is it tested? Try to bring a contradiction in concept test. Try to bring a contradiction. Would it possibly achieve the means to the end, the means of the action you're proposing? If there's a contradiction in the will test, could you consistently will that this social world should exist? When we say contradiction, we are saying that as long as this law comes in, if there's anything contradictory, unless the law still stands, then it can't be a universal law. Now, there are also, however, exceptions to the rule when you think about this kind of universal law. Okay? So let us say we have the right to protect data, but then we are aware that there is data on somebody's phone, which data can point to a murderer. Which data can point to a murderer. And you can save people's lives, you can solve cases if you gain access to that person's phone. But if the law states that private data must be protected and it's on my phone, then that law, should it still continue when there is injustice, or there's maybe injustice or danger that is coming up if you haven't accessed that person's phone? So that's another ethical dilemma. Yeah. Criticisms of deontology. It's an inflexible rule. It's an inflexible rule. If you say that this law stands for everyone, and the example I've just given you of phone data, I mean, in places like the US where the law is the law, someone can get away with saying, this is my private phone, do not access it, and maybe in the process, you bring about injustice or even danger. So there's some maxims which may seem to be okay, may fail the CI test. Yes, please. Is there a person with a question?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So like you've not I've not got a conclusion about the other issue when someone is having certain data on their phone, and then that data is to save some people's lives. So how do we handle it ethically?
Now, again, it
Because
depends on what
I've
is
not
the
got
law. It
that.
depends on what is the law in that country. Now, for example, I've seen cases, especially like in the US, where something like that has actually brought about injustice, where somebody says it is the law, we are going to keep this thing private, you can't access it. Other countries, no, that won't go. That will not be acceptable. Now, let me also state in another situation. I think in the US, they began to say if something is going to lead to saving a life or bringing about justice, we can't save lives. Now, however, the same law they tried to apply to the Catholic Church. Now, in the Catholic Church, we have something called confession. So let us say, Sheba, I go for confession, and in that confession, I admit that I killed Patrick. Now, because of the seal of confession, nobody can ask a priest to come and divulge what that person said during confession. Actually, if a priest does it, he's excommunicated by the Pope. It's a complete no-no. And the primary reason behind it is that whatever is said in secret is whatever is said in confession is God's own secret. And we don't have the right to go and do rugambo. Now, on the other hand, of course, a priest may encourage someone that, okay, if you've killed someone, one of the things you must do is go and repent. Go and you must make reparation. You must go and give yourself in. But he or she cannot make the person go and do that. But so you see that again, the CI test may not work for everyone. So for some places, like I gave you a human law can be changed, but a law, like for example in the church, cannot be changed for the sake of anything. So there the CI test doesn't work. We have no positive formula for constructing maxims. Yeah. So there are some maxims which may be created, but in reality they have a hidden agenda. Now take the example maybe of NASA. It may be a law for the US to eavesdrop on your private communication, but in another case, someone may do it just for the sake of bringing you down, of having leverage over you. The whole approach, that using rationality instead of feelings, can be mistaken. Some things which may seem rational, in reality may not be rational. These are some of the major moral principles that may help us guide as far as deontology is concerned. We ought to act in ways that do not cause needless harm or injury to others. That's one principle that can help guide in deontology. So, for example, there are some laws which may end up hurting other human beings. I'll give you an example. In Pakistan, there is a law called the blasphemy law. So the blasphemy law basically says if someone is caught in an act of blasphemy, they should be put to death. So as much as, of course, Pakistan is a very, very religious country in terms of Islam. Now, the unfortunate bit is that in certain situations, the minority Christians were sometimes targeted by Muslim citizens. And there was a case of a lady. She was with, I think she had gone to fetch water or something, and she was with other fellow ladies, but who were Muslim. And I don't know, really, no one knows what happened, but she was accused of blasphemy. Yeah, that she was accused of insulting Muhammad, and she had been sentenced to death. Now, of course, how we all got to know, her family put out an outcry, and at a certain point, the international community came in to plead for this lady. But in that time, a lot of cases came up where people were saying that many times if there was somebody who was not liked in a community, especially a Christian amongst majority Muslims, they could easily slap on you something like that. You said this, but there is no evidence. But simply because it's an offensive thing to a particular religion, people simply go ahead with it. So there, the principle of non-maleficence, when you're causing harm to another person, that law sometimes deontology may be used to cause harm to others. The principle of beneficence, we should act in ways that promote the welfare of others. These are just some principles to come up with the maxims of deontology. The principle of utility, we should act in a way that will bring about the greatest benefit for others. Yeah, so these are just some principles that guide deontology. We look at our final theory, virtue ethics. Okay, here we're looking at good character, how to develop good character. We can always tell good character when we see it. For example, you can say that this lady is usually very neat and smart. That is an example of virtue ethics. We can say this person is always decent in speech, in dress, things like that. We can always tell a good character. In actual sense, what virtue ethics says, we say we want to become the person that we wish to be, that will do what is right instinctively, that I don't have to think about it, or I don't have to wait for people to see me. This is something that I must automatically do. Just even small things. There are people who automatically, when they wake up, they will lay their bed. Then there are those who might even enter the bed, the way the person left it in the morning is the way they will go back into it at night, unlaid. So those habits where someone picks them up and says, look, let us say if amongst us, Sheba is not good at laying her bed, then she says, let me develop the habit of laying my bed. And I do it today, tomorrow. Maybe I skip a day, but I come back to it and I struggle to see that I pick up this good habit, which leads to a little bit better neatness. How do we become virtuous? We start by developing habits, instincts that virtuous people bring out. So things like upbringing, your education, reflection, experience, and things like that. What are these habits or instincts? So we look at those who are moral exemplars. So take an example of Christianity. One might say, let me look to Jesus. And the way Jesus behaved is the way I should behave. Another will look at Buddha. Then we have those which are scientific in nature, like this picture you see above. Someone may say, I see so and so is healthy. This person is always doing exercise. Let me also pick up the habit of exercise so that I can be healthy. Or let me pick up the habit of eating healthy. So you look at moral exemplars in your society, in your community. That's what drives virtue, ethics. So we normally talk about moral virtues and practical non-moral virtues. So moral virtues are things like compassion, honesty. So someone says, let me focus on attaining these virtues. Let me be more compassionate, more respectful, loyalty, things like that. Then we have the non or practical moral virtues, where somebody says, I want to gain let's say I want to increase my skills in programming. There you're looking at virtue ethics. Let me improve my skills on network security. Things like that. My capabilities and my intelligence. Let me read more on this topic and increase my intelligence, rationality, and so on and so forth. So you have these two types of moral virtues. So sometimes, again, I want to drive to the point of ethics and goodness and sainthood. They are not the same. So at your workplace, you might say, at my position at work, let me focus on being more honest. Maybe focus on being more thoughtful, considerate. Another person will say, let me look at the non-moral virtues. So here is a typical example. All of you have come in to take on a course on diploma in IT. That already is an act towards virtue. You want to increase your skill level. You want to increase your knowledge level. That's already a virtue in itself. You're moving towards a good. You're moving towards something good. So even at your workplace, you can say, let me learn better how to do network security so that I may increase the security of the organization that I'm working for. That is a non-moral virtue. Here are just some criticisms of virtue ethics. We have different cultural groups, and because of these, you can have differing virtues, or some things that may be virtuous in one culture but not in another. So this may lead to cultural relativism. Yeah, cultural relativism. So virtue ethics may praise certain character traits, but this provides us with no insufficient practical guide about which specific action to perform to attain certain virtues. So take an example. If I say I want to be more compassionate, so the question is, what does it mean to be compassionate? What do I do to become more compassionate? Is it that I look at everyone and say, oh, sorry, everyone? I keep saying, oh, sorry. If somebody says, I want to kill myself because I'm depressed, I should say, oh, Bambi, you're feeling depressed. It's okay, you go ahead and kill yourself. Am I being really, really compassionate? What does it mean to be compassionate?
Well,
So virtue ethics sometimes may not be a good guide. Yes, is there someone with a question or comment?
I was like saying no.
Yeah. Sorry, Patrick?
To advise someone who's depressed to kill themselves. That I was just commenting about the person who is depressed. Like it's not, you shouldn't advise them to kill themselves. You should just be there and comfort them and find a way out of getting out of that depression.
Yeah. But you see now there are some people who because of relativism will say it is actually more compassionate if a person feels they should kill themselves, allow them to do it. There are those who have those arguments. So virtue ethics needs to be a little bit more concrete. So that's it for our theories on virtue. Do we have any question on sorry, on our theories, all our ethical three theories? Do we have any question?
I don't have.
Okay. Now I'm going to put up your assignment shortly, which is going to look at these at some case studies which you then present as a group. As soon as Moodle is back up, I'm going to put it up, and then do we have groups? Do we have groups amongst you?
No, we'll just form.
Okay, once you formulate them, can you send them to me so that in Moodle I partition you as groups? Is it okay?
Okay. We are going.
Okay.
Yes, madam, it is.
Okay. Do we have any question?
I don't have.
We are all okay?
Yes.
Okay, then. Okay, so what we're going to do, let me put up this assignment for you. On Moodle, I'll let you know as soon as it is up. I'll let Ivan know and he'll let everybody else know.
Okay, madam.
Okay. So I can wish everybody a good weekend. We meet next Saturday.
Thank you very much.
Madam, a moment.
Yes, please.
Like, madam, my Moodle had some work I was supposed to do, so I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Your what, sorry?
Like my Moodle had some issues, like, and I wasn't able to submit my work. So by the time it had to get in order, I tried to submit, but they were showing that time is out. I was locked out, so I don't know how I'm going to manage.
Okay. Okay, once it's up, I'll extend the time for the discussion forum. Hussein, you have a question or comment?
Yes, madam.
Yes, Hussein. Hello, Ivan, can you mute? Yes, Hussein, you have a question or comment?
Madam, I'm failing to approach the ethics, the course on Moodle.
You're failing to access Moodle. You're failing to access the course unit.
Yeah, of ethics on Moodle.
You guys have? Can you share with him the link and the enrollment key?
Madam, we have the link, but when you open, they show you that the enrollment disabled.
Enrollment disabled.
Yes.
Okay. I'll go in and check. I'll go in and check.
It's okay.
Okay. Okay, then. If we are done with the questions, can we? Can I wish you all a good weekend?
It's okay, madam.
Weekend vibes.
Thank you very much.